Assalamualaikum and welcome to Ungku Aziz Brownback webinar series. I am so delighted to welcome ladies and gentlemen to 5th Ungku Aziz Brownback webinar series. My name is Asma Abdul Rahman. I am Associate Professor and Head Department at Department of Sharia and Economics, Academy of Islamic Studies, University Malaya. My expertise is Islamic economics, particularly Islamic insurance and wakaf. Before we start our webinar, there is housekeeping reminder. To maintain the audio quality and minimize any disruption, the participants are allowed to ask questions to the speaker through the message box only, and no verbal questions is allowed. The Royal Ungku Aziz Chair was established at the Faculty of Economics and Administration, University of Malaya, to honour the contribution of Professor Ungku Aziz in the field of education and economic development, especially rural development and poverty. The Ungku Aziz Center for Development Studies is created to facilitate the activities of the chair. Since 2019, the center has undertaken steps to develop and further expand the field of development and further development studies to reflect its interdisciplinary nature, to attract a wider participation, to engage young minds, and to go beyond a monodisciplinary approach to development. The defining pillars of the Ungku Aziz Center for Development Studies represents the center's evaluation and the dynamism of the field of study. The purpose of this webinar is to provide a platform for the Ungku Aziz Center research recipients to share their works and ideas on their research findings and development issues that are relevant to the Ungku Aziz Center's aims and objectives. Today's theme webinar will be based on Ungku Aziz Center Research Pillar 2, which is Poverty and Sustainable Development, which is in particular to understand and search for compatible frameworks between development targets such as growth, poverty eradication, the provision of basic needs, employment creation, equity and distribution, while sustaining the environment for future generations, and to design appropriate policy measures for social transformation and managing sustainability. So before we start, let me introduce our esteemed speaker today. So our speaker today is Dr. Makmor Tumin. He is an associate professor from the Department of Administrative Studies and Politics, Faculty of Economics and Administration, University of Malaya. His field of research are comparative political thought, civil society, and social policy of public health. He also engaged himself with other areas such as religions and politics, as well as development studies. Religiosity and income is one of an example of his work on development, including other works such as Multidimensional Poverty Index and Health, Poverty and Income. He has published 7 books, 4 on politics and political thought, and 3 on social policy. So this webinar will be based on his research with his research members of recipient from the grant awarded by the Ungku Aziz Center. So his research team are Mr. Nawi Abdullah and also Dr. Ahmad Farid Osman. So let me read the abstract for this webinar series. This webinar series is based on interesting theoretical and empirical work, which is suggested that religiosity declines with the increasing of the income. However, there are evidence indicating that majority of the world's richest people are religiously affiliated. suggesting that the relationship between income and religiosity is not linear. Some theory describe the religiosity of the poor as an escape from hardship caused by low income status. Could the rich also have an escape? This study used cross-sectional data from 105 countries to examine this dual escape hypothesis. Using per capita GDP by country as a measurement of income in 3 different survey-based measures of religious commitments, which is importance of religions, praying daily and weekly attendance of religious services to represent religiosity. Controlling for income inequality are education, communism, and Islam. Multivariate regressions reveal that the relationship between each of the 3 measures of religiosity and income is better explained by a quadratic regression than a linear regression. The predicted relationship between income and religiosity implies that religiosity decreases with increasing income to specific turning points, which is the first hypothesis, after which increased income associates with increased religiosity, which is the second hypothesis. And the turning points are identified as 41,290 USD dollar, and then $44,900, and then $34,270 for the importance of religiosity, praying daily and weekly attendance of religious service respectively. It is important to mention that while the study utilized sufficient data to support the first hypothesis, there is a lack of data to support the second hypothesis. So without further ado, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Makmor Tumin to present his research findings. So Associate Professor, you are given 45 minutes, and now the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, Dr. Asma. Thank you to Ungku Aziz Center for the financial assistance and logistic support. And thank you for all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining this webinar session. I must introduce myself, but slightly different. I have eyesight problem. Saying eyesight problem seems that's not enough to explain about myself. I am blind, totally blind, and this is important to begin with. Here is the title: Income, Religiosity, and Dual Escape Theory. Income is indexed by money of currency, and religiosity is somehow metrics by the church attendance. Dual escape theory require a little unpacking, I guess. Let me start by saying religious of the poor and the religious of the rich. What explains the religious of the poor is the escape theory, the first one. What explains the religious of the rich, the second escape hypothesis, or sometimes I might interchangeably use the word theory. This explained by the escape theory. Yes, I understand it may not immediately clear to some of us. Just suspend our disbelief first as we move forward. Research questions, the games in town that we are looking here. Secularization is the placeholder here. When I say the placeholder, this is something that we're going to know later. Secularizations said some things that religiosity declined in the presence of increased income. However, interestingly, we know that there are also evidence suggesting religiosity increased in the presence of increased income. But interesting, I guess, And this might suggest what the Madam Chairperson mentioned just now. It is something like U-shaped, quadratic. The escape theory for the poor is commonly understood based on the literature. It explains the poor escape from hardship caused by the low income status. Would the rich have an escape? This is the business that we are working on in our project. We're going to use published material mostly, and we're going to contrast and compare with the empirical data. Note has to be made here. This is theoretically driven project. Theoretically, is in this context has two dimensions. Empirical, theoretically driven research, which commonly based on empirical data. We are not moving to that directions. We are using the normative data in order to understand what exactly the theory we are going to speak about today. The type of the data we're going to use, as I said, published material based on expert opinion, and at the same time, idea by the thinker. The empirical data we use to serve in order to contrast and to compare. This is the outline. The first one being the escape theory, religion, and the third one is the thing that we want to essentially zero in, the second escape theory. I think a little diagram will be helps in order to understand what exactly when we mean theoretically driven research, because it has the element of philosophy in our discussion. This is just simple diagram, however, all people may be quite familiar. We want to say mention the diagram here because we want to rehearse a bit what thing that we're going to throw into the diagram, what exactly the thing that get captured and manifested. I think it's a normal thing. X being the horizontals, and we have two variables there, age and income, and also the Y being vertical there, we have religiosity, suicide, opium. What is this? Okay. This is the thing we're going to discuss moving forward. Okay, give some sort of idea here, the big picture, the big puzzle. Secularization being the placeholder, the big picture. So I think we have to understand something like this. The type of jungle that we're going to explore, a jungle between religious world and secularization world, the line there. We don't want to mention anymore about secularization theory, sounds redundant. Just focus what we have below, political science, sociology, religion. Another diagram may be needed now. Just put it at extreme right, France, the extreme left, USA. Okay. When we say something about the separations between state and government, just imagine USA. When we say sociologically, separation between not only politics, economy, education, socials, and every aspect of public life, just imagine France. What's made in the between? What is made in between is countries such as Turkey. This is the business that we're going to do. A little bit is perhaps need to be explained what we say when we mean religion. Writings God, and if there is issue, we take a decision that lexically prior. Lexically prior, basically when we have a line there, religion, secularization, because religious people appreciate the invention, innovation through the secularization, modernization. As they have a problem to move there, if there is issue, the decision has to be lexically prior. Lexically prior. That is the big picture. This is the escape theory, already established in literature. I'm not going to go in detail. There are three here. One, Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, and Nietzsche. Karl Marx says something like this: behavior. Any behavior is a manifestation of something stressful. So people behave in some way looking for religiosity in order to remove or escape stress. Second one, being understood by opium, Karl Marx, simply means capitalist state is very exploitative. Proletariats or the workers are being exploited in this game. They are so stressful and they result to religiosity. Understood as opiums temporarily needed in order for them to gain strength and move. Quite hunky-dory, I guess, a little bit here. I think another note has to be made here. This is a period that's around late 19th centuries and early 20th centuries. The idea of religions is in some way understood as organized superstition. Organized superstition. Now, further down, Friedrich Nietzsche is even so quote-unquote vulgar. He make a proclamation, God is ... the four-letter word. Not the four-letter with S, but with D. God is there. Secularizations, according to him, as we kill the God, what else we will? Do whatever you want to do. Why wait? Release your desire. Of course, this is extreme secularization theory, and this is the way that we do know in the literature. Okay, I'm going to a kind of brush paintings, a couple slides coming forward. So this is the thing that says about the religiosity of the poor, individual or household data, also aggregate data. It is clear here, secularization seems having its explanatory power, reducing religiosity, somehow increase income, both at the individual and aggregate data. Rich countries, rich peoples, this is a survey of 13.1, more than 13 million in the West. It says something so interesting. Close to 70% people are religiously affiliated. Okay, and majority of the people that surveyed was Christian. Now, you might wonder why I use church at the very beginning, because we are going to look at people in the majority Christian countries. Okay. A little further down, this is a kind of aggregate data. It tells us that a kind of U shape can be made, U shape, quadratic. Okay, because it involves majority Christian countries, that is letting the majority countries in the West, but in this case include Philippines. Now, sounds hunky-dory here, as if what Karl Marx says, religion is opium, is correct. But what it is really correct, what makes the thing from the turning point move instead of southeastwardly, it moves to northeastwardly. This against the secularization theory already. Secularization theory may have lost its explanatory power. Therefore, its emancipatory potential. We must admit mixed data, mixed result. Okay. But against methodology is the game here. Positive, negative, etc. But we can strongly convince to say that there is no country in the West that we found are majority atheists or secular. You might say why I move so fast, because I want to give an opportunity to Q&A, but I have other thing to do, because the business that we are zeroing in here the second escape theory. This is another thing based on the data 105 countries. What exactly there? We based on the Pew Research Center, and what is important is not so much on this. I must admit that we have two papers, one empirically based, the other paper, and this one is theoretically based, because the reviewer asked us to come up with some things theoretical, explaining why the rich also increase its religiosity. Just look around us. If secularization is really true, you might see that no one rich at the same time religious. And therefore, something has to be said about secularization theories. Now, I understood that in the previous slide, I didn't mention what's in the index, not so much, because this is not the game that I'm going to share here. This is the thing based on the empirical data that we have. I must thank my colleague, Dr. Farid, for providing this thing, and also my chief, Dr. Nawi. And this is the diagram that I have. This all first, the one, says something about how they think religion is important for them based on the data, and also how weekly church attendance and how they are religious. It seems that secularization based on this data still kicking. Still makes sense somehow argued. And it also suggests, at least based on this data, aggregate data, it's not only explanatory power, but emancipatory potential also kicking. What do we mean emancipatory potential here? It has the forces to transform peoples. People gradually become modern. I must say the GDP here is, GDP per capita. Okay. And this is the business that we're working on together. Okay, this is actually, I'm going to spend a little bit detail because this is the business that we are working on. If I can come up something new, this is going to be novel. Otherwise, it's just like another research. The escape theory. How to build a theory. Theory for the rich, how they escape. From the philosophy that I learned, if you really want to build theory, new idea, you got to start something extreme about your subject matter. My subject matter is escape. Escape theory. What is the extreme thing the individual can make? Escape from themselves. Individual committing suicide is really an escape thing. People thought that someone escaped from the prison, but it's escaping from our own body. I guess it's the extreme case that I can make in order to understand or build theory, hypothesis. So we start thinking about, escaping from oneself, death. Death is the game in town now, somehow understood. Then we look at somehow the data about death, natural death, or we might say suicidal and non-suicidal death. There is other type of death as well. What is death? Probably natural disasters. So we just being agnostic about that for the time being, just share what we have, and I hope all of you are still enjoying. Those of you, ladies and gentlemen, who are joining this webinar session. Now, what exactly here? Now we have somehow an idea here to share, suggesting, majorities, natural ones, natural death. Okay, cardiovascular. Then we also, suicides, in the low and middle income countries, WHO data. But we do not know whether it's a result of war. Celebrity that we know commit suicide, COO, so rich people in a neighboring area, and we know also the young age belong to the affluent family, more or less. But what is interesting to us is down there, based on the research that we referred at the below. It suggests something like U-shape as well. U-shape in that sense, someone that might want to know, it is, suicide high when you are poor, somehow moderated at the middle, and gains, move upwardly, suggesting the rich also committing suicide. See whether we have any idea to build up the second escape theory. We want to know, of course, religiosity. It seems to suggest here, somehow we understood, is something like this. Religiosity is useful. Religion is useful. The usefulness, we underline the word usefulness of religion, is so also kicking. Look at what the thing that based on this research. Suicide is low among those with high religiosity. And religion gives you a lot of things here. Include, among other things, to correct the tendency of psychopathics, move down into so many things, make ourselves, we can control ourselves and focus. Now, so much about death, then I guess death is the second placeholder, because we want to know what exactly the new idea that we want to develop. So death, religiosity, and other variables, income, age. Why age? Let's what the thinkers say here. Now, this is the tools that we use to chop off the tree. 2, 3 being the important trees we study under the big pictures, the jungles of secularization theory. We have discussed about the first 3 already in the literature, first escape theory. This is the second escape theory. We need chainsaw to chop off the tree. This is the chainsaw from Mr. Hobbes and Mr. Rousseau. What exactly here? What we learn from Mr. Hobbes, this is more or less my area already. What we learn from Mr. Hobbes is quite interesting in that sense that, look in his book Leviathan, we can call it dictator or powerful leader, whatever that you want to name it. In the literature, we know that people always say government is at best evil. See whether it's evil now. It is dictator and so on, but at the time of violent war, when death is imminent, people become brutal and nasty. Your neighbor is your enemy. You plotted to kill him, and he, in equal proportion, also want to kill you. So imminence the death. Since death is the placeholder, death is important in order for us to develop theory. And Mr. Hobbes says, the government is, I need to protect me now. The government that used to be at best evil, government now at worst my protector. Come, please help me, and so on. Imagine COVID. If friends next to you or your neighbor, all of them are affected, you need not only all of them to be locked down, if possible, try to lock down. Also my house, because my children is always asking to go out to join the others. State, what is evil? Now state is my protector. What I'm trying to say, what is irrational now become rational. The same also apply to religion. Religion is understood, somehow argued, as irrational, especially among the secular scientists, suddenly become rational at the point of fear of death. At the point of fear of death, maybe whatever age that you want to mention, hundreds, the mortality rate, you want to include Tun Mahathir, maybe just a side joke. It's at the point that people are points, you are in the deathbed, breathing out, having difficulties, and so on and so forth. You start looking at the future data. What exactly I'm going to be, what going to be happens. And a kind of curiosity is there, with future data there. There's future data over there. If you are so rational, you start making pleasure and pain calculus. Maybe there is a pleasure of paradise, the pain of hellfire. One time, mathematical calculus suddenly appears in your mind, one after another. Then you start making future reverse causality in your diabetes. You may be irreligious, irrational, but at this point, religiosity is rational to you. First, Chainsaw, we want to understand the escape. Second, escape theory, to be precise. Second one, Mr. Russo. This is specific for the rich. Prof, commonly expressed in the West as egocentrism. What exactly Prof? Super ego of the rich, of those in the upper echelon in society. I am what I am. Rousseau says something like this. Look, we impose standard for our own self, KPI, whatever here and there, our chief target, progress, etc. What he said, improper, those in the upper echelon, the risk, the boss, whatever. I better don't mention the dean and so on. I'm going to be in trouble after this. So those in the upper echelon and so on, they are there. He's super ego now. He thinks that everything that I think is the right thing. Now, this is not enough, according to Rousseau. Not only what I think is the right thing, I want other people to agree with me. This is not enough. They must believe with what I say, KPI, etc., etc. This is not enough. They also must believe the way I believe. Super ego. The problem is so stressful to control too many people and so on and so forth. Stressful and so on and so forth. There is a point committing suicide. Suicide? No. Rousseau said there is way out for these kinds of problems. Somehow I understood. Just be a simple life. Back to your nature. Simple life and so on. What simple life? What you are stressful. Simple life. Stressful. Still ego. Committing suicide? No. So much stressful and so on and so forth. The thing that you say irreligious before, irrational, maybe I need to be religious. At least the data already discussed that it's correct the tendency of psychopathetics. It helps stressful, etc., down there and so on. God that teaches is a zombie, that God that you worship, that is my own emphasis, is the God now that you become thinking the rational thing that I must worship. This is the escape from stressful. First, fear. The other one, escape from ego. Thanks to Mr. Hopes and Mr. Russo for helping me and the group to develop theory. Okay, this is exactly what going on in our mind as I mentioned some things about this theory. I got to wrestle my mind a bit to the less intensity so I can make sense what exactly here. This is the diagram that we rehearsed initially. Same thing. Okay. So X being the income and age. And so let's start with the debt. Debt is the placeholder. Debt is the placeholder. Let's look at debt. Debt at the point of, close to what Mr. Hobbes says. So fearful. Okay. We have to have a kind of game here. Press 1, press 2, press 3, press 4. So you maybe understand what's going on in my mind and also my group mind. That press 1 for age and religiosity first. Press 1, age and religiosity. Okay, let's see what. It's commonly or almost conclusive that as we get older, we become religious. Conclusive here. The Pew data that we refer clearly mentioning about these situations. It's commonly understood, and if we can look at just look around us when people in their deathbed start chanting, start remembering God, and so on and so forth. Those who are Zen may say Om Topo, and those who are Islam say Allah, and the list goes. That's the point there. That's the point there. So this is, I think, explained, but this is general, apply to rich and poor, apply, and so on and so forth. Then we know now, at least, we put dotted line specific for the rich. Regardless whether you are rich or poor, at that point, we try to escape. Even though you're making calculation, as I said, future data is there. Pleasure and pains you already see there. Even though you think that you are secular, at that point, after making future reverse causality, then you see the rational thing is to be religious. That's from the point B to point C. Now that's together with me wrestling our mind, looking at the point B. The point B is the game in town for the rich. We can say also from A to B. And this is now Rousseau. Yes, now Hobbes, Rousseau. So from A to B is Rousseau. But Rousseau is so important here. Then we can sort of press button 2. Okay, button 2. Then we see income. We want also to see religiosity, yes. And we also want to see suicide. Suicide. Okay, press button 2 now. Income, religiosity, suicide. What we learn from Rousseau, what make the rich escape? You reach that point, more propos, rich, boss, upper echelon, so stressful. In front of a camera, you look so mighty, making decisions, etc. Once you put off your camera, you know yourself. Okay? So rich, so stressful to target everything and so on. Rousseau said, no, go to A. Simple life. In Malay, we commonly say, kembali kepada fitrah. Back to your nature. What back to the nature? You are somewhere there. You are somewhere there. And no, so stressful, and you have to think, committing suicide. No, committing suicide. Everywhere inside the box is committing suicide. Many options there. Upon serious thinking, you might see religiosity. Well, the thing that I might say here may be derogatory to some of you. No, I'm just, make all of us enjoy the thought process. And this, after all, Mr. Rousseau, if you don't like this idea, you can burn his book. I must admit that I must apology, if you are somewhere there, This is what normally, even you are kind of secular and so on, you might be thinking, this is the way out. Again, I think I'm maybe arrogant a bit when I say something about that. May Allah forgive me, sir. Okay, this is the thing that I'm trying to say. Well, what left? What miss out? D. D also here of that, point of that. We want to say something. Maybe you have an anecdotal experience. You know that person all this while you know, the 80s and so on and so forth. But suddenly when they reach at their old age, 95, maybe close to 100 and so on and so forth. Again, the future data appear. This all pain and pleasure seeking and so on. And in same like what Hobbes says at the top. Now Hobbes also says at this point, probably even secular scientists may want to think the best option is to be religious. After all, what I'm going to lose. Now, I must say the title is Gain, Income, and Religiosity. I try my best, try to respond to the question, and I try my best to answer, to develop the second escape theory. And this down there is the line about the escape theory and so on. You can, I guess, read it. And this, I don't think at this point, even you are Marxist in some sense, we no longer agree with this idea of the rich and the religion is the opium for the rich. I don't think so. After all, people know that traditional secularization theory doesn't really work. It loses its explanatory power and its emancipatory potential somehow measured. It's lending time now. As I said, I want to stop as much early as I can so we can have a QA come to play. This is the database on the Christian world that we gathered tell us the secularization does not support the secularization theory. But we must admit that as we contrast and compare with the evidence of pure religious centers, the secularization still somehow still having its explanatory staying power, and therefore its emancipatory potential should be acknowledged. I think what is important there, this limitation on the future research. I think I will try to be serious about this thing. So when we talk about future research, this is the last moment that we want to salvo. Let's look at the first limitations. And looking at this double predestination, Calvinism. I shouldn't say that I know much about Christianity. This is based on what Max Weber said, and some of you already read his book, after all. Max Weber here tried to explain some things about these predestinations. I think I'm going to be brief a bit because a little bit dizzy. Okay. Try to be brief here. Okay. What Max Weber said? Yeah. We know that over the world, the civilization first took place. We know in China, we do have Confucius. We know in India, we have Bautelia, all before centuries. And somewhere in Jerusalem, we do have Judo-Christian civilization. Okay. Yeah, a little bit dizzy here. Okay, never mind, I try my best. As I said, I try to be brief, although I thought I want to try to be serious. So what Weber tried to say is why the current civilization, education, science, and etc. are in the northern, is in Europe. Why not in China? Why not India? Why not somewhere in Jerusalem, but in China? Why? Okay. And not only in Europe, but northern Europe. Now we begin to look at religion, and we discover this hypothesis, double predestination. What exactly? The first says God is so omnipresent. He chooses what he chooses to guide what he's guide or to misguide. Apology for that. Yeah, if you are rich, you're fine, but if you are poor, you are so unsatisfied. Huge sense of spider at the back, unsatisfied. Okay. And therefore, through pre-assurance, a new hypothesis of predestination developed. This according to the Calvinism teaching. You must have confidence in life and in God. You must have a confidence. This is your duty as a Christian, your duty. But is to have a confidence, you must look for something. If the something is the worldly success things, if money is the thing for you to make you confident on your God, on your life, then look for money. Confidence in God is so important. Okay? Confidence is so important. Okay, now this, why, according to Weber, the spirit of capitalism begin. This double predestination, right? Looking for success, money, worldly money, is the way that someone build up their confidence, and therefore their duty, and therefore the invention, science, knowledge were developed in the northern. I don't want to be a kind of derogatory saying the region that far from the Vatican City is a region that was developed. I also understand that so-called Vatican II transforms within the way being done in Catholics and so on. I aware about that. Okay, now the second one is the second thing for the future research is even more important than the first one. And this is about religious firm and new knowledge. All this while when we show the curve, something the curve like down here, is from the demand side, the public demand for religiosity, for religion. Try to think on the supply side now. Supply side. Investments on religiosity. We know just now there is a religious capital to be built. Religious capital. We know about social capital, economic capitals. We also should know there is a religious capital to be built. So from the supply side point of view, investments on religion is so important. Church is going to invest, and also state has to invest. Investment is. Now, how about state become monopoly? I hope you don't mind me closing my eye because it's a bit dizzy. State monopoly of religion, for instance. And the question of state monopoly surface in some of us somehow understood. Then we see something like this. Policy going to be made and so on. And the moment we talk about public policies, there's always a problem of corruption and rent seeking. People may use policy for their interest and so on and so forth. When it's so top down and so on, there is always possibility of crowding out and so on. So the diagram below try to say something. If we really want to do a future research, it's actually happening. It's based on the literature that we get. We know this already happening in the West. Try, for instance, regress pluralism. We regress pluralism now. Look, actually what actually happened in US, for instance, among the best example, model of pluralism. According to Esposito, expert in religion, in 1980s, not so much can be said about mosque, temple, etc. But 1980s and so on and so forth. So pluralism. The local people become so worried about their own culture, own religion. Okay. Now, after that, the terrorist attacks, people now, and after that, this is what so-called ethnic and religious populism. Because of once we divide pluralism, then we can have an idea there. Religiosity somehow increase. The far right, and also in the Muslim countries, people start talking about religion. Just imagine in Malaysia, for instance, when we talk about liberalism, yes, people might think, yes, this is something, but religious people become too worried. They start conducting lectures after lectures and so on. Investment for religiosity become increasing. So this is the thing that I think if we want to conduct research, we have to look at on these things. A lot of things we can discuss. I want to stop here. I hope everything is hunky-dory now. Okay, then go back to Dr. Asma and from me, Mr. Hunky-dory. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Makmor Tumin, for your insightful presentation. I would like to congratulate you and your research teams for successfully complete the research. And I believe your team has put much effort in completing this research. So before I invite the participants to ask questions to Associate Professor Dr. Makmor Tumin, I have a few comments on your research and your presentation. So basically, based on your presentation, you have taken escape theory and also secularization as your basis of doing your argument to show that what is the escape theory which is reflected with religion. So my wonder is that do you also look into the literature which is to suggest that just when people really embrace into any religions because they want to escape from unpleasant pressure or from psychological pressure. I think that literature then will help to justify your finding when you find that actually for Christian, for example, when they are rich and yet they are religious. So I think this literature will help in justifying, okay, your finding, and you are not only looking into this escape theory and also secularization theory only. Okay, I think with this additional literature on do people when they embrace any religions, the reason is because of they want to escape any psychological pressure or because of low income. So that's why they want to associate themselves with the religions. Okay, so because in the literature, I think there are abundance of literature that suggesting that people are embracing any religions not because of the economic pressure, okay, but because they are looking for contentment. And this also associated with the teaching of the religions itself, okay, because of the value that religion are offering to their followers. Okay, so I think by balancing between this theory that you have been taken and the literature on the importance of the religions, then can balance, okay, your discussion and also to support your finding. So this is my humble opinion to you and your research team. Okay, and also if in your theory suggests that, okay, if people when they embrace the religion, okay, they might not do something, okay, because of the limitation that have been put by the religion. But on the other hand, thus when they do not embrace any religion, they can do anything that being seen as good for them based on their freedom perspective. Because yet still, I think in your presentation, you did mention about people, whatever that we did, we still want to meet the expectation and the value of the community or the society. So the issue is, does the value that being set by the society is the value which is concrete, holistic, and can be embraced as truthful beyond space and beyond time. because we understand that the value may change based on culture, based on political change, and also the change of the lifestyle. So if I can give a simple example, like previously, if we look from the philosophical perspective, okay, so for example, Aristotle, Plato, they also condemn, okay, the practice of charging usury when people are giving loan. So that was the philosophical understanding back then. Okay, but the value has changed when people start to see that charging usury is something which is acceptable. Okay, so that's why it then transformed into capitalist businesses whereby there are banking institutions which are charging usury, and it is justified as acceptable by the people. Okay, but when we look from religion's teaching, okay, because of the teaching in Christianity, for example, okay, the charging of usury is something which is prohibited, and that is maintained as the teaching that being embraced, okay, even though the value of the people may change, but the teaching of the religion is there. So that's why, based on the theory that you have been presenting, that if people want to set the value, I mean to comply with the value that is setting by the society without depending on the religion, then they might have a pressure because of the changing of the value itself. So I mean, my suggestion is that maybe you can discuss, I mean, in your literature, okay, the other picture of seeing things, okay, from the religion's perspective. Okay, and then other than that is about when we are talking, I mean, in your presentation, I mean, based on your theory also, which is about when the poor people associating themselves with religions, okay, because of the economic pressure, for example, and do religions see the lower economic condition as something which is threaten the society? Because I think in the teaching of the religions, okay, there are the emphasize and has been put as importance for religious followers, okay, to ensure that this group has been taken care of, okay, by having social security net mechanism. Okay, so for example, if you can see from the teaching of Islam or Christianity, okay, there are encouraged to do the charity or to give donations, okay, to these poor people. Okay, so meaning that religions don't see this lower income group as a threat to the society, but they have to be helped. Okay, they have to be taken care of. And for example, if I can share, like in Islam, as we know that the act of giving donation as obligatory donation, which is zakat, as a pillar of Islam. Okay, so this is a social security net, which will be there forever because this is the pillar of Islam. So the poor, okay, will be increase their standard of living, okay, by getting financial assistance from their fellow friends of the similar religion or of the same religions. And in fact, actually, for Muslims, okay, to have those who are not Muslim, there's no limitations, because there are also encouragement, okay, in terms of giving sedekah and also other mechanism. But this redistribution of wealth to other person, okay, especially those who are lower income society, becoming a very important agenda in the religions itself. Okay, so I think this is also the point that you can add in your research and in your discussion, okay, in my humble suggestion and opinion, okay, to enhance your research finding. Okay, so and we also look at, for example, in terms of secularization, which is to differentiate between religion and politics, religion and social life. Okay, so I think by having integration between religion and this aspect of our daily life, okay, it actually can become a guideline, okay, which may have a proper way in terms of the implementation. Okay, so I think this is another literature that you may add in your research finding. For example, like when we're talking about the integration of religion with economy and businesses, for example. So I believe that all religions, okay, have thought on the importance of the ethical dimension and the importance of embracing the ethical philosophical activities, okay, wherever they enter into any economic and business activities. Okay, so I'm not the expert on Buddhism or Christians or Hinduism, but what I can share is that, for example, in Islam, for example, okay, the act of cheating, okay, the act of reducing, when you are weighting things, when you are selling, okay, or you are cheating the ingredients that you are producing or manufacturing, okay, and this is the prohibition of these unethical acts, okay, is not only being conveyed, okay, to the people who are embracing religion, okay, not only 104,000 years ago during the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it was the teaching before that. Okay, so if I can share, I mean, we can trace this. For example, the teaching of the Prophet Shu'aib, which is before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the period of Prophet Shu'aib, which is before the period of Isa alaihi salam, or being known as Jesus in Christianity. So this was the main teaching, okay, of Shu'aib to his people, other than the teaching of engaging with the divine being. But if we look at the Quranic verses, the most important teaching of Prophet Shu'aib being repeated in the Quran is about don't cheat people when you do the business. So I think this is one of example of the religious teaching, okay, that shape, okay, the way that the people behave, and especially when it's come to the business and economic activities. And I think this is also something that I think can enrich your research, okay, when you also discuss another elements of religious teaching, okay, into your theoretical part that you have been discussed earlier. Okay, so I think that's all that I would like to comment on your research and your finding. And now I would like to open the opportunity to all the participants. Okay, if you have any questions, okay, so please write your questions on the message box, so then I will read the question. So there is one question, okay, what is the risk escaping from according to the hypothesis? So okay, so this is the question for you, okay, what is the risk escaping from according to the hypothesis?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you for those also asking the questions. Very interesting question. I mean, based on this finding, we see two things. Number one, they are escaping the fear of death. So to escape the fear of death, they try to look into a religion, because over there they might find peace. Therefore, the first one we learn from Hobbes. And the other thing, the rich escape is from try to escape their more proper thing, the super ego thing, and so on and so forth. Because to that point, you know, of course, you know, you have to maintain all whatever you have said. And because of that, you know, you of course don't want to commit suicide, but you don't think, you know, going back to the simple life is the option now. In order to do that, then to go to look peace, to look consult into religion. This, I think, the way I understand. I'm sorry I couldn't focus looking at the camera, a bit dizzy. I think this is more or less the idea. The thing, escaping from the pressure of the super ego and so on. Otherwise, if you don't have ego, I think you don't do much in this life. The super ego, in some sense, just a bit positive, because we need a super ego also in order to make sure everything is in order. Without the super ego, I think everything will go haywire. People don't really look at what is important about their job scope and so on and so forth. I mean, there is a need. There is a need to have the super ego somehow. But I think maybe, you know, occasionally, yeah, one can look at for religiosities as mechanism to cope up with the stressful life. So to answer the questions, you know, it is first escaping from the fear of death, and number two, the escaping from the tension, stress, to be immovable, super ego.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. And then we have another question, which is, and how do you see it manifesting in Malaysia? Okay, so
how do you see? Can I get this question?
How? Yes. How the rich escaping?
Oh.
Okay, that theory. How do you see it manifesting in Malaysia? How?
Yeah, I think the same thing might apply, but we don't really have any data to say anything a lot about that. After all, these are majority Muslim countries. But I think any religion somehow understood their principle is more or less the same. Salvation, for instance, in Christianity, maybe the beginning may be slightly different. In Christianity that I know, because the research is about Christianity. I mean the idea of fall, man, and redemptions in order for go ups into salvations. This is the main idea, I think, in Christianity. In Islam, yeah, this is different, because the origin of mankind are understood as something different. I think I just speak what I know a little bit about Islam. There's a concept called Dinul Qayyim. I mean, if you draw the diagram, whatever we want to assume, the point, the origins, you know, from Christianity is about fall, man. Fall, man, I think you already know, is a transition between forms, I should say. Transition from initial obedience into deep disobedience. And this is more or less that I know. So redemption is needed, and therefore you have to move, you know, into religion so you can attain salvation. In Islam, the concept is different. Dinul Qayyim, correct me, Dr. Asma. Dinul Qayyim, I think if you really want to serious about this thing, look at Rome, chapter on Rome. Rome being here, not Rome, Vatican. Rome is today Istanbul. You might look at the English version. It's the Byzantine. In those days, in 7 centuries, during these revelations of chapters were revealed, it was Byzantine. So therefore, the name of the chapters are Rome. So look at verses number 30. There is a sentence that says, we are Dinul Qayyim, literally translate that I understand. We are by nature in the straight path, Dinul Qayyim. And this concept, Dinul Qayyim, have been explained and so on in hadith, narrated under the authority of Abu Hurairah and been also available if you have the copy of Imam Muslim. So this is the thing, the Dinul Qayyim, which is the beginning and so on. So in Malaysia, as I said, I do not know much. I might answers here. Yeah, because let me say something from myself. This is I think much that I can say. I said something just now about how about we regress pluralism in Malaysia. So religiosity, then we regress pluralism because now Malaysia is somehow the pluralist value. Sorry, I can't really because of the something going on in my head. Pluralism. Let's say you might say if you have the curve still, with you the U shape, then you might see there is the turning point will be pressed down because of you might see let's say if you move up practicing Muslims and as you go down you become non-practicing Muslims and then you go to the point there is a point of zero of religiosity there. Then it's not the case of in Christian kind of world as opposed to Muslim world, because in Muslim world there's a potential threat of apostasy, murtad there. Then of course it is not really apply in almost Muslim majority countries because the ulama know when and how to apply it. So you see that it's going to be close to that line. Therefore you may have something like liberal Islam. This is the example that the turning point will press down and so on. But at the same time, you also look at as I said just now, religious institutions begin to worry in this thing. So investment on religiosity going to be increasing. So I think this much that I want to see, especially to my account. I'm not the expert of Malaysian politics. To my understanding, if we look at the rise of Bumiputralism, the rise of the Malay, let's say we see the rise, that happening how many years already, 4 or 5 years here, is somehow not only just a response of quote unquote, I don't want to be racist, the so-called, I think you know already, you can smell the coffee. But this is very much about this thing, the liberalism. It is an immediate response. It's noted from the United Nations Charters of Civil Rights and so on. Will give a lot, freedom to, as you see just now. After all, I already said the individual right, LGBT, homosexual, and so on. The Malay in general becomes united, not so much because of the non-Malay things. They are united because this kind of liberalism thing. If you look at that point, you see the demonstration in Malaysia so huge in number against this move, whether government going to endorse or not. So this is the way that I think when you regress now, pluralism, you see the curve as I showed video that going to be like that, investment and so on, everything. We're moving in every direction now, moving down there, moving there, moving there, because countries start taking effort on both sides. That's why I said, yeah, the demand side is important at the same time, the supply side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. And then another question is, how do you see this finding or your hypothesis impacting policy making in Is there any?
Yeah, I think that's one thing. If I want to say is, this is about fear of death, and the committing suicide. Okay, committing suicide is one of the issue. The policy, then one way, this is at the level of human nature, human psychology. We know from the finding the usefulness of religion. People no longer talk whether your idea is coherence or the idea is rational. Yeah, this is important, of course, but people want to ask, how your idea is useful. So the usefulness is the underlying word now. So I think knowing that there is evidence to say religiosity helps to improve religious capitals. Government, yeah, have to invest on this thing. It is important. But we also, I think this just to maybe a side joke, if I still can do it. There is estimate to say the probability that people commit suicide is even higher than the probability of yourself being attacked by the terrorists. What this estimate says, this is something interesting. Maybe we have to worry about ourselves more than we have to worry about the terrorists, because the chances that we take our life is even higher than the chances that terrorists are going to take our life. I need just a side thing, and so on. Committing suicide is really. So maybe focusing on these issues, committing suicide. Maybe the case is not so high in our countries, but something must be done at the policy level. Another thing that I want to say is, if you really want to regress pluralism, I think then we can learn a lot. We don't have a data. If we do that, I think the data will tell a lot about the policy, how we can responding to this thing. Maybe also another thing, because we know the emo propos makes people so stressful. So we know about that data. So because of that, I think the coping mechanisms, in order for companies to achieve their targets and so on, I said I don't want to be derogatory from the beginning, super ego. This is in the literature of the past, especially by Rousseau. But then I have to say over and over, because I know someone may feel hurt unnecessary. I mean, because of my necessary take about the Rousseau and so on. I think what I'm trying to say is, the coping mechanisms, people are so stressful now. Maybe there's a policies, maybe at the university level, for instance, and of course the state levels. Maybe there is a counseling mechanisms. It has to be people, the sub worker, maybe workers at the top echelon as well.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. And then another question is about okay. So this question is that you mentioned about God choose who shall be rewarded and punished, guided and misguided. So according to your opinion, how does God choose? Based on our activities or other reason? Thank you.
This is very good question, by the way. This I think very important one, of course. Let me say what I know a little bit. Otherwise, I don't want to be seen like not responding to the question. If you begin to talk about God and so on, I don't think that I have a knowledge about vicinity to that level. Although I say something, this is within the Calvinism. I think if you press me seriously, I think if you really want to look at these things, there is a book by the classical Islam, Imam Abu Hasan Ash'ari, and later developed by Mansur al-Maturidi. It's a very good book. It tried to respond the kind of predestinated Jabariyah that the Muslim call, and so the other one, the Qadariyat types or tendencies to a certain extent, rationalism, Mu'tazilah type and so on, a kind of double predestination thing, somewhere in between that people call Sunnah wal Jama'ah, commonly known in and there is a book by him, if serious. One of the book I know is about Al-Usul al-Diyani. The first part of the book by Imam al-Ash'ari. It's a very interesting book. I must say I haven't read it. I just follow whatever people say and so on. But this book tells this between these two. Yes, the primary law that you say God chooses. Yeah, the primary law do exist, but secondary law also operate. Maybe we use our choice and so on and so forth, but everything that we choose is governed by the Islamic law. I try to give a kind of analogy, if like, the way I understand it. We are somehow autocruise being. Autocruise being something like this, we drive our car, moving to our destination. There is systems inside there determined by the Almighty God, autocruise by Him. Okay, but it doesn't mean we cannot make a choice to take left and right. It's still there. The choice is still there to make right. But somehow inside us, through the dino being, we are autocruise being set by the Almighty God. The choice is still there. Primary law and the secondary law operate. I hope I make sense. No, as I said, I'm not coming from that kind of. This is just more than the general knowledge that I know.
Thank you. And then another question is about if we were to expand on this path, what areas in economics do you think or suggest can be applied for exploration purposes for the Muslims in Malaysia? I teach Islamic economics here and have mixed racial groups of students. So I am eager to do justice in terms of opening their mind to the practicality of Sharia-based system as the most feasible alternative in the long run.
I don't think I have the authority to answer these questions, but again, I mean, just to say my general ideas. Of course, a very interesting question, very important one. Maybe I might see myself like knowing what economy. No, this is just a positive externality that I'm sitting here. The expert is just around me. Those experts from economics, from statistics, just nearby. So this is what we call, I think, positive externality. If you are so positive, and of course you get advantage from this all the knowledge. The knowledge of economy that I have is only 101 economy, because I did studies here. So everything that I base my understanding about this presentation, all 101 equal 101 statistics. In fact, the statistics I just recently from my colleague Dr. Farid, he installed the software in my mind a little bit and so on. I use whatever that I understand. So all 101. I don't any specific knowledge. But I think if you really want to talk economic Islam as a matter of principle here, and Islamic finance, and also the other things, I read a book by Sadiqi. I think if you know this economic Islam, people, gentlemen, and so on. But my quote unquote, can I say, concern, because I'm not the expert. I mean, that's my overall opinions. If you look at the literature going back and so on, it doesn't really see that, quote unquote, this kind of work is kind of critique, but you should take it as positively. You look at the literature, there is a missing part. There is a missing part, and so on. I know there is a book, Al-Kharaj by Abu Yusuf, one of the interesting books people refer and so on. And there are people talk about a little bit somewhere missing. What happens? The literature sort of jump, go backward and so on. There are missing there. There's no something in between. Yeah, people talk about what happened after that. There's a kind of missing link and so on. And suddenly literature from the West come into this. But I say, of course, literature from the West is so important as long we practice what I said just now, lexically prior. Lexically prior, what is it, and so on. I mean, just more or less based on my sort of casual reading. If that can be strengthened, you can say something about authenticities of the idea. I'm not saying the current idea is not authenticity. It have that problem. I'm thinking about the going backward and trying to look at other literatures. This is missing. They're missing. I don't know what should happen in between and so on. Maybe the way I see it, if you look at after Khaldun, we don't have thinkers among the Sunnis. Thinkers, I mean saying thinkers at the level of Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina. We don't have it and so on in literature. Yeah, we may have in between, the Shi'is a little bit. I know Shah Waliullah in India, there somewhere there. Yeah, I know, but I think not so much the level of that I expected. Maybe, I don't mean to not underestimating anyone's Maybe the literatures now, not so much in the Baghdad and so on. It has somewhere in the Paris, in the Persian regions, the tradition of Sarazis, Mullah Sadra, this kind of thing. It's a very important literature. Okay. I know in this Said Hussein Nas, we speak about the tradition of Shi'i, how the literature continues, not somewhere in the Sunni, but somewhere in the Shi'i dimension. And that much that I can see.
Okay, so there are. I think there are. I mean, can we take last question, because we are running out of time?
Yeah.
So there has been a surge in religiosity among both the wealthy middle class and the poor working class, but the reason for this rise differs. So what are the core difference, in your opinion?
Rise is different. Yeah. I think if U-shape, it has to be like this. It be like that. I think. In the U-shape, this side rise, this side rise. Okay, let's say take the case of state intervention, the supply side now, the supply side thing and so on. As I said, in the case of US and the far right things and so on, there is called, I think, in economy, behavioral economy, I suppose, the concepts of negative, the positive and negative things. The negative concept zero-sum win-win and so on, zero-sum and so on. Now, what actually happened is this is in the book that I read. In US, it's not a question of the because globalized and so on. Globalized, interesting because Zen's and Buddhism's rise in California that I was told, and in Korea you can see the rise of Christianity, the rise of both in the so-called developed, whatever development is in both sides. So what actually happened, the local people over there being threatened by the foreign culture, quote unquote foreign there, foreign culture. So because of this foreign cultures, as Esposito mentions, there was no temple, no mosque and so on, but suddenly you see mosques everywhere and so on and so on. The local people are so worried about this. Now, first because of economic globalization, big companies, corporations move into developing countries in search for lucrative profit and so on. But the people down there economically are already affected, but culturally, religiously, they are on the negative side in that sense that not only because of this competition and so on, not only they no longer can compete because of the foreign labor can give so many things, lower chips levels, they don't care about unionism and so on, as long as they got money and so on. Not only that, the problem is not only they don't get what they want, they have lost what they had before. This is the kind of the thing. Because of this kind of losses thing and so on, you might notice the energy to become far right is so strong. This is one explanation for this, because they have lost what they gained before. They enjoy. Simply put, you may be someone rich, whatever, but because of competition and so on, you become the middle class. The middle class, you were middle class enjoying your life. Now suddenly you become poor. Especially if you look at the white among the rural areas and so on. It's not a strange thing when Trump can win the election because they can exploit this thing. In our countries such as Malaysia, the same phenomenon is, as I said, rise and the rise of religion in this country. This, as I said, it got to do if you regress pluralism. And the rise of the Bumiputra coalition in these countries. It's the same phenomenon when you see liberalism here, the Muslim in particular, look their religion will be in danger if these things. Now the rise, now you can create another hypothesis here. The rise here could be the rise of consciousness about religion. But if you're going to talk about public policies and so on and so forth, so you're going to talk about and so on corruption and rent seeking. The rise also explain the rise of corruptions, the rent seeking behavior within the state and so on. These are the things.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Makmor Tumin. So I think we cannot take any more questions because we are running out of time. So I would like to thank Associate Professor Dr. Makmor Tumin and his team for sharing their research with us today. So I think religions, people are looking into embracing religions because I think people are looking to the meaning of life, why we are here and where we are going, which is the most important inner questions that come to our life. I mean, either we aware or not. Okay, why we are here, where we are going. And to find these questions, we may looking into different paths. Okay, so that's why we choose whatever we want. Okay, but by looking into the proper knowledge and proper justification. Okay, so in terms of today's research, which is about the suicide. Okay, when this it relates to the religion, so I think it also relate to the meaning of our life. So do we value of our life? Do people value their life? Do they have something, okay, which is contentment in their inner understanding or inner embrace? Okay, and also when we talk about ego, so all of us we have ego. Okay, and I think based on religion also, this is the most important lesson about the ego. And I think, for example, for the Muslims, and one of the main reason, okay, that we study about the ego is about when what happened, the discussion or the conversation, okay, before the mankind, okay, being put on the earth, whereby the first mankind, the first human being created based on the Islamic teaching, which is Adam alayhi salam. Okay, so when all the angels, okay, including, okay, the Satan, which are required to submit to Adam or Adam alayhi salam, but the Satan, who is the ego being, I mean, by having the ego feeling, okay, decline to submit to Adam. Okay, so this is the first lesson, okay, that we learn about the ego. Okay, and so that's why in terms of we human being, religion put few mitigation risk of taming our ego. Okay, so I think that's my comment about our discussion today. And the Ungku Aziz Center would like to invite all participants, okay, to join us for another next series of the webinar with the topic of rural residents' perceptions on the poverty alleviation and governance in Sarawak, which will be presented by Dr. Peter Aning Tedong and moderated by Dr. Hanafi Hussein. Okay, on 17 December 2020. Okay, and hope you can free your time and join the webinar in the future. So I think that's all for today, and have a nice day, everybody. Okay, and again, thanks to all for your questions, and our apologies for not be able to answer all your questions. But you can email your questions if you want to know more about the issues, okay, to the center or to Dr. Makmor or to me if there are something related to my field and my expertise. With that, thank you very much and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.